So now imagine this: you're a fine gentleman, you see a beautiful young lady sitting alone, wanting to befriend her. You approach her, give your best line and best raise, and then wanting to conclude everything, you ask for a phone number and ask her to introduce herself. And then she opens her mouth and begins to speak Chinese. Taking a second look at her, she looks African, looks Ghanaian, but she didn't really comprehend everything you said. Then her friend approaches you guys, and then she finally tells you, that is her friend, tells you she is a Ghanaian born and raised in China, and she moved back to Ghana not too long ago. So she's not really conversant with the English language or any Ghanaian language, but she looks African and looks Ghanaian. So were you talking to her? Yes, you were. Did you pour out your heart out and your feelings, emotions? Yes, you did. But were you communicating? You weren't. Because in terms of communication, there has to be a base foundation, which is a language, a common language actually, that should be between both parties. So over here, why are we taking this approach to today's session? The thing here is, most of the times as Christians, we feel our lamentations, our tears and our worry moves to God, or God should understand our lamentations and worries and complaints. But that isn't we communicating to God. John 4:24 tells us that God is spirit. So if God being a spirit, it takes a different rules and principles to approach him or please him or communicate with him. Because think about it, to please me being a human being, I'm Desmond. On my birthday, if you buy me a birthday cake, I'll be happy. But the thing is, God being a spirit, can you do same to him? Can you communicate same to him for him to understand you and then respond to your worries and lamentations and fear? The means of communicating with God, who is a spirit, is through prayer. And today's session on Lamp and Light Tuesday is that intimacy and prayer. Let's dive straight into today's session. Welcome to Lamp and Light Tuesday. So now, building an intimate relationship with God through prayer, using Jesus Christ as the model or template with which we New Testament Christians ought to live by. So when we read 1 John 2:6, it tells us that if we say we abide in him, and this him being Jesus Christ, we ought to walk the same way Jesus Christ walked. So let me read 1 John 2:6. It says, whoever abides in him, that is Jesus, ought to walk in the same way in which he walked. So this walk, like I said, isn't literally referring to the walking or way Jesus Christ walked, but how he lived. And when we study Matthew, Mark, Luke, and then John, it tells us how Jesus Christ lived. You realize that normally Jesus Christ would wake up before morning, go and then climb a mountain and have some time in prayer with the Lord. That is you building an intimate relationship with God through prayer. Because like the example I gave you before, in terms of communication, we communicating with God, there has to be a common language between both parties. And how we communicate with God as New Testament Christians is by the means of prayer. So as a Christian, you cannot trivialize building an intimate relationship with God. It isn't the complaints that God understands. It isn't the worry that God understands. It isn't the lamentations that God understands. You don't expect God to understand your tears or understand your suffering, so he should just come in and then help out. You ought to open your mouth and pray. So moving on, when we read 1 Thessalonians 5:17, it simply says pray without ceasing. Pray without ceasing. Because the thing here about prayer is, prayer benefits you than it benefits God. I repeat, prayer benefits you than it benefits God. Because the Bible also tells us in Matthew 26:41, it says, watch and pray that ye enter not into temptation. Watch and pray that ye enter not into temptation. So like I said, prayer is more of a thing. Prayer benefits you than it benefits God. Because one thing I've learned experientially is that prayer makes you sensitive to the voice of God. Prayer makes you more sensitive to the leading of God. Because get this, the moment prayerlessness becomes the lifestyle, you begin to walk by the flesh. You begin to walk by your feelings. Basically, when I say flesh over here, it refers to your feelings. You begin to live life by your feelings. And the thing is, not all you see is all there is. Not all you see is all there is. You can't see the air. Doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And everything that God spoke out from the beginning in Genesis 1 was birthed from the invisible. This whole earth, everything we see around us, was birthed from the invisible. And to make it more practical, it's the mother that gives birth to the baby, not baby to the mother. So if the invisible is giving birth to the visible, then it means the invisible is more vast and greater than the visible world. So you begin to live by your senses, by your feelings. You begin to miss out on what God actually wants you to go do. So like I said, prayer makes you more sensitive to the leadings of God. This is why we ought to build an intimate relationship with God through prayer. Building an intimate relationship with God through prayer, like I said, benefits you than it benefits God, because God is a spirit. So the Bible also encourages us that walk in the spirit and you will not fulfill the lust of the flesh. And talking of walking in the spirit, one way of doing that is through prayer. So you can never trivialize prayer as a Christian, that is a new convert Christian for that matter, because like I said, all you see is not all there is. So I think we all remember when Jesus Christ had to sack the people selling in the temple, and he made a statement that my house must be called, or shall be called, a house of prayer, but I've made it a den of thieves. So now that statement underlined that my house shall be called a house of prayer. So now moving on to 1 Corinthians 6 verse 19, it tells us, or makes us understand, that our bodies are the temple of the Holy Spirit. Our bodies are the temple of the Holy Spirit. So now Jesus Christ saying his house, which is a temple, shall be called a house of prayer, and our bodies being that same temple where the Holy Spirit lives, must also become the house of prayer. So at all time in this body there must be prayer going on. This is something profound I think we ought to make a practice of. And thank God for the gift of speaking in tongues. It's a gift you can use at will. It's a gift you can use at will. You don't always need the coming upon of the Holy Spirit on you before you'll be able to speak in tongues. Speaking in tongues is a gift you can use at will. So in the life of Jesus Christ, we also saw the effect of prayer on the Mount of Transfiguration, where the whole garment of Jesus Christ was altered. Prayer can be likened to intercourse. This is why God, in his own wisdom, limited every form of sexual activity in the confines of marriage, because it is you getting to know the person on a more intimate level. This is why the Bible puts it, Adam knew his wife, representing sexual intimacy, because that is you knowing the person on a different and more intimate level. So you cannot trivialize prayer, getting to know God outside of the boundaries of prayer. This is why we ought to always pray. The Bible tells us, 1 Thessalonians 5:17, pray without ceasing. Pray without ceasing. Because when you refuse to pray, you begin to fail. It's a month of intimacy, and we are concluding this whole month with intimacy in prayer. You can never know God in a more intimate way outside of prayer, because prayer builds your spirit man. Not to make this whole session lengthy, I think this whole month has been a blessing to you. Thank you so much for making time to watch. I'll see you next month. Share this with your friends and families. Solido Gloria. Bye.